Welcome to Redefining Medicine, an intimate and personalized program that illustrates a different side of the practice of medicine. Our in-depth conversations will focus on mentors and motivators who are consistently reshaping, redefining, and rediscovering the field of medical healthcare. I would like to welcome Patrick Savage, CEO and founder of BodyLogicMD, who has applied his broad business background to the rapidly expanding market of bioidentical hormone replacement therapy.
Thank you so much for joining us, Patrick. As CEO and founder of BodyLogicMD, and without having a medical background or a background in the sciences, how did you come to develop this organization, and why?
You know, I'd spent 20 years in corporate America, so I think I have a story kind of like most of the doctors. It's just from a business perspective rather than from a medical. You know, a lot of the doctors I run to are, burned out doing what they're doing. They're tired with insurance pay. They're working hours. They're not seeing their family, and they all want to transition into something because, as I have learned over the years with this practice, I mean, this really is health medicine, and everything else they've been doing is really disease care. And so they wanted to translate out into something they could do something that they loved better, and that they could do something that really why they got into the force of medicine. Well, in corporate America, it was kind of the same thing. I was captured or trapped by corporate America. My last position, I was executive director worldwide of Tyco International. I had 1,000 employees working for me. I had a $100 million budget. I was never home. I was traveling all over the country. I had call centers, all over the world, I had 26 countries I worked with all over the world, and I just was miserable. And I'd gained a lot of weight, and because of the stress. And at some point in time, my opportunity came, and I just stopped. And I thought around for a couple months on what I was going to do, and I actually got introduced to this field. And one of the things, what's that?
How?
Actually, one of the practitioners that I knew who had helped me during the last year of my life at corporate America, I'd gained a lot of weight, and they actually put me through the program, put me on hormones, taught me about diet, taught me about exercise, and I'd shed about 120 pounds of weight. You gain a lot of weight when you spend every night at a restaurant or at a hotel with executives and all these different people.
You were 120 pounds heavier than you are now. Wow.
And I shed a lot of weight and put back a lot of muscle, and I was 40 years old, and I was finally feeling really good. And I thought, this is a cool field. Now, before I was executive director of Tyco, I was actually the senior vice president of consumer marketing for AT&T Universal Card, which grew from 0 to 23 million customers in 7 years. It won the Malcolm Baldrige Award. It was on the Academy Awards. It actually eventually got purchased by Citibank for $4.5 billion. But one of the things we spent a lot of time on was consumer marketing and using the skills we had on how to bring that live. And I started looking at this market, and back then, I mean, I'm going backwards to early 1993 or so. All of us by then were talking about year 2000. We're talking about the millennials. What can you provide to consumers that you want to have as a recurring base, because those are better than selling things that you have to do on every time. You want a service over a product. And we're looking at it, and you want something that attracts to the baby boomers, because everybody at the time is talking about, what do you market to the baby boomers? And I began looking at this market going, my God, you're talking about, this is like the perfect baby boomer market. And it got me really excited about the possibilities, because it combined my commercial background with my business background. And the idea was, and this doctor was like, I want to open a practice. And I was like, that's cool. That would be neat, because it'd be really neat to figure out if we could build a model that would allow you to be a doctor. Because one of the things I think doctors might not understand getting to their own business is that the vast majority of the time they're going to make revenue is when they're seeing patients. So now if they have to cut out 30% of their time and spend time with their marketing team or their PR or their accountant or their lawyers or their landlord or their staff, well, they're not seeing patients, and they're going to be declining on what they could actually generate revenue. So we wanted to work out a model where the business part could be done by us, allowing the doctor free to spend the vast majority of their time actually practicing medicine. And that's really what began BodyLogicMD, and we established in 2003, opened our first clinic in 2004. Now the timing is like everything, right? Because right mid-2004, all of a sudden the World Health Initiative study comes out about the dangers of Premarin and Prempro, right? And all of a sudden there's the big media controversy about all these non-bioidentical drugs that have been treating all these women, and the advent of this idea of bioidentical hormones started to leak into the market. And we just had been positioned in that area, and so we started growing through that. And of course it was followed subsequently, wonderfully, a year later by another book by Suzanne Summers, because her book actually came out the same month we opened our first clinic, her first book. Her second book came out about a year later, and it actually included BodyLogicMD. which was, again, just a real great coincidence of occurrence going on. And then we just began growing it up. And it really gave me a chance to, understand more the doctor's perspective and what's happening in our disease care system, what's happening with insurance, and actually talking a lot about with doctors about they're afraid of going into a cash-based business.
How did you overcome that?
It takes a while. It's something that I think every doctor eventually, like anybody else, like I had moving into this business, was everybody's going to have to have their own personal epiphany about something. And I actually work with our doctors because we now have 70 practitioners in 50 locations. We cover 32 states, and we have 17,000 active patients under care. Our doctors as a whole, between the 50 practices or so, do well over $20 million in consultation revenues. So you can do the math. I mean, these are from the ones that are 1 month old to the ones that are 10 and 11 years old. And it depends by size of market and all that, but it's about the services that they want to offer and the understanding that patients really will pay for this expertise. A lot of it is, you talk to them about lawyers get paid cash. Lawyers bill you in 6-minute intervals. And lawyers actually, their biller rate, especially if they're specialists, which is really the key for this market, and part of what I'm so impressed with A4M, is the level of expertise that they can instill in these doctors through MMI and through the fellowship training programs. And the doctors are, lawyers are billing out there at $600, $700 if they're specialists per hour. And doctors are coming out thinking, I'm worth $200. It's like, no, you went through way more education than a lawyer did to get their degree. And then you spend hours and hours going through more educational training with A4M. Our doctors have to actually complete all 8 modules, the first modules of the fellowship, as well as 20A and 20B to be part of our expert physician base. And that really levels to the point that you're looking at these doctors going, you really should be making about $700 an hour in cash. And that's unheard of to these guys and women, and they've just never really put it in that kind of perspective. The part about doctors moving into a cash-based business is part of this industry is not all cash. Many of the insurance companies, many of the labs use qualified insurance plans, so do many of the pharmacies. Really, it's the provider that is going to a cash-based system. Because even if the provider tried to go back into the insurance side, right, they can allot like 6-minute, 15-minute, or even 60-minute billable hours, but the return, what they get from the insurance company, is like $150. It's not even worth their time. These rates were built for the disease-based medicine model, where the provider comes in, spends 6 minutes, and the rest of the work is being done by the PA and NP. The model in integrative medicine is much more of a consultation by the physician with the person. It's not just, hey, you got a runny nose and I'm going to give you this kind of medicine. It is a hour-long, generally, consultation initially, and a series of hour or half-hour follow-ups over the course of a year, not uncommon to what I consider a psychologist. It's not uncommon that people see psychologists and they'll see them for a full hour every week. And that's a pretty common thing in the US, and if they have 52 visits and they're paying, the standard rate's about $200, that patient's spending $10,000 just in psychiatric care. And it's not making them feel better. And a lot of the issues, when I talk to a lot of my friends that are psychologists, they're like, a lot of the issues, they're referring patients back to preventative and integrative medicine practices because the husband or the wife are having marital problems because she's not interested or he's not able. And all of a sudden they go through some hormone therapy and they figure things out, and all of a sudden they're happy as clams. And it's a fraction of the rate of a year's worth long of therapy. And it has also, what's that?
And divorce.
And divorce. Oh, well, and that's the other part.
Right.
And so, that aspect of it really drives where physicians really ultimately have to have some personal epiphany of, it's okay. Patients will pay that. And my doctors often there are consumers that will say, I'm not paying that. Okay, that's okay. I mean, in traditional medicine, when a patient's with a doctor, the patient and doctor never discuss money. So the doctor never loses a patient over money. In this case, doctors really have to get comfortable with, it's okay if patients choose to want to find a lower cost alternative. I know in our model that happens. I mean, we have 15,000 patients. We lose about 500 a month. So, that's not uncommon. But what's interesting is every month, 120 people are coming back. They've gone down the street or they've come off therapy, and then 3 months they come back to our doctors and say, I'm just not feeling good anymore. I want to get back into this program. And doctors really, I think one of my best practitioners, I always enjoy talking to him when he talks about the patient that, claims they don't have enough money and they're going to go down the street. He actually has business cards on his desk of his competitors. And he says, that's okay. here's a competitor down the street, because he knows they're going to go down there, and if they're not providing because they're not well trained, they haven't gone through the same things that A4M's affording those practitioners, they're going to be back.
So how did you first come to learn of A4M?
Actually, that was the first show. It actually was happening. We incorporated in October. We'd heard about the show in 2003 here in Vegas. And it was like, look, we're going to get into the industry. I want to see what this is all about. And at the time, it was the one I knew of. And coming here 15 years ago is a little bit different experience than you come here today. How
have you seen the changes and the exponential growth?
The quality of the training, the quality of the exhibitors is dramatically much better. I mean, there was a lot of stuff 15 years ago that I'm not medically based. So a lot of what I see in the exhibit hall, I may or may not understand. But 15 years ago, there were things walking around and doing things that were like, okay, this is interesting, very interesting. But there was a lot of, it's fascinating to me that a lot of the core contributors that were there 15 years ago are still the ones here. And they're just bigger now, many of the pharmacies, many of the labs, as the industry has begun to really grow. I mean, this industry as a whole, if you read the stats, the anti-aging U.S. market is over $15 billion, expected to grow to over $20 billion within the next 3 years. And it just shows you that, those are huge market numbers, and it covers all the various areas of the pharmacies, the labs, the supplement companies, and the providers.
And why did you choose A4M to be the sole provider of education to your physicians?
I had a chance back 15 years ago to work with Dr. Smith in actually establishing the fellowship. And I thought that was really the way, because there wasn't at the time, 15 years ago, when we started the company, any training. So it wasn't like there was an option to go somewhere else. And Pam did a great job of building up the fellowship program, and it got to the point that we're like, if we're going to be the best network, which is really what I wanted to do, it's about providing what I felt was the best-in-class service that the providers could do to the consumer, then they had to have training. And so we just locked it into our contract, and as A4M grew and became bigger and became even stronger and better in what it did, it just never made sense to go anywhere else. We've been a continuous partner with A4M for 15 years.
Patrick, what differentiates a BodyLogicMD practitioner from a primary care physician?
It's really the focus of the medicine in one aspect. The traditional doctor is dealing with runny noses and flu symptoms and broken arms or those kind of aspects, and it's non-elective. Those patients, right, when they feel that way, must go. Doctors focusing on integrative care and functional medicine are really trying to figure out how to help that patient be healthier, to live a better and longer life. The average population in 1900 in the US lived to 43 years old. Fast forward 100 years. By 2000, the average population age is now 82. We didn't get 40 years of greater quality of life, we got 40 more years. And generally the last 10 to 20 are not that attractive. So a lot of the patients that are looking at now as the baby boomers we talked about earlier are coming through that aging population, because we're still not even through midpoint yet of the baby boomers. They're starting to realize, I don't want to be like my mom and dad. I don't want to be disabled. I don't want to be hurt and not able to, my brain's there, but my body's not. And so they're going through this type of medicine to try to, learn how to help their body and, feel better all the way through to the end. I often joke with our doctors, I think the best objective for these doctors to have is to get the person to live a well life all the way to their end, wake up in the morning, make love to their spouse, go play a game of golf, have a great meal, and drop dead. That's my personal choice.
Are they dropping dead at which point in time?
When I'm old.
Okay, right, no, forget it. So with the FDA potentially approving bioidentical hormones, what will that do to BodyLogicMD and the practice of hormonal therapy?
Yeah, that's a great question. When BodyLogicMD started, again, bioidentical hormones was quackery. Medicine takes about 10 years to catch up on itself from when it learns its new studies and it evolves and the practitioners actually start adopting it. And when I started, the bioidentical hormones was the thing that wasn't safe until the World Health Initiative came out, and all of a sudden we found out that a lot of the non-bioidentical hormones were the ones that were potentially causing cancer and all those aspects. And bioidentical hormones over years has started gaining more and more validity to the point, and I've watched these battles over the last 15 years with the manufacturing pharmacies, the Wyeths, the Pfizers of the world attempting to shut down bioidentical hormones. They're now starting to adopt the approach. there's actually a very large pipeline of FDA-approved bioidentical hormones that are in research study stage right now. And there's many of them that actually reach the market for our doctors already. The Veldot, S-Trace, Testapel. Many of those are coming into the market, but they're coming in much bigger now. And what's going to happen is that that's the ultimate testimony of the fact that bioidentical hormones is, in fact, the right way to treat patients. And what we're going to watch as it goes on to it is how these are actually adopted into the practices, how they're adopted by compounding pharmacies, because compounding pharmacies can, produce compounds, but they also can produce manufactured drugs to your patients. And that's what's going to happen as we come into this. And more, I think, especially over the next definitely 2 or 3 years, you're going to see people actually marketing FDA-approved bioidentical hormones within their practice.
So in addition to bioidentical hormones, what other therapies, modalities do BodyLogicMD doctors provide?
We do pretty much the full functional or integrative medicine approach. We're dealing with lifestyle, fitness, hormones, but also, the estrogen-based programs, testosterone-based, the growth factor hormones like somorelin and sarcotropin. We deal with sexual wellness programs, and even more recently some of the cognitive boost programs through brain stimulation and the drugs that you can do that can kind of stimulate that. One of the bigger advents coming on is going to be PRP. That's something we're looking a lot at and how that's going to react in the industry. But one of the things I always try to coach physicians on repeatedly, and I do this with my physicians too, stay in your sandbox a little bit and do what you do really well. I see a lot of doctors come through these shows and it's great, but they pick up 15 or 20 ideas, and sometimes when they go home they have to remember, am I doing what I'm doing right? Is there ways I can do what I'm doing better? And before you start adding in a bunch of whole new things. It's a little bit sticking to your knitting, but at the same time, there's a lot of exciting stuff coming out in the field, and it's fascinating for me every year to walk through the exhibit hall and see, because I've walked through it now for 15 years, and seeing all the new advances that's coming in and what's going to be happening in the markets.
And what is your expectations for the next 3 to 5 years for BodyLogicMD in terms of growth?
Very exciting. I mean, there's just a tremendous amount of activity that's going to be happening. Like I said, I think we're trying to figure out different ways that are going to come in with these new treatment protocols and modalities. Our practice base continues to grow. I mean, we added another 10 practices last year. Our rate of growth with new patients continue to increase. Just this year alone, we've added another 10,000 patients. And so as the consumer awareness starts building up, which is really the thing that's up next, through various areas, as the consumer modality increases, right, there's just going to be a bigger demand for everybody. I mean, I tell doctors all the time, they're like, BodyLogicMD is big. Yeah, we're good size, but it's a $15 billion US market. If we're doing $100 million in total revenues, right, we're like 0.01% of the market share. The vast majority of the market share is going to be covered by the local practitioner.
And how do you identify if a physician is somebody that you would like to be affiliated with?
Our qualification for physicians really follows on 3 things. We're looking for passion, knowledge, and actually what I call the red wine test.
How many glasses they can drink and keep up?
Having dinner with us. It's about a social part, because this is a very social engagement kind of practice that you're spending hour long, you're connecting with a very important patient, and there's a certain level of sociality that has to happen with our doctors. And our doctors actually, one of the reasons we don't lose a lot of doctors. They are successful, and they stay in the network not only because they can be successful, but as Jennifer Land, our Chief Medical Officer, talks to the physicians all the time, one of the things they form is they call it the brain trust. A lot of these doctors feel isolated as they go into their own private practice, and in their local town, the gynecologist or the family practitioner, internal medicine are like, I don't know what that stuff is. I don't understand holistic medicine. I don't understand functional integrative medicine. And there's not a lot of people these doctors can go to. In our network, our doctors have constant communication all the time, every day, through voice and through emails, through FaceTime, and talking with other doctors or all the doctors on not only presentation of symptoms, but a patient had reacted this to me when I talked about price. And they get like social support over, it's okay, that's going to happen. See your next patient.
So what advice would you have for a doctor who is considering crossing to the other side, so to speak?
One is understand what they want to do and that they really want to do it, and they have to get trained. I mean, I just don't see the physicians that they're not successful when they don't get trained, and patients pick up on it pretty quickly. They have to find a very successful person to help them in marketing their practice, because in traditional medicine, their marketing consists of accepting an insurance contract and getting listed in the directory. You know, that's how they marketed their practice. This is a very different world. You know, there isn't a lot of insurance for the physician cash pay business, and you're gonna have to figure out how to bring yourself, build your own brand, and market something locally. The other advice I'd give them is take counsel from your accountant and lawyer, but only counsel. The fact is your accountant is supposed to keep your books correct, and my history is I use a lot of wonderful accountants, but I don't get a lot of business advice from them because they're more grounded in what they're trying to project. They're more conservative in business planning. And lawyers, they want to keep you safe, and I think you need to take their advice. But the people I'd really go to if you're thinking about starting your practice is find another doctor doing this and ask them. One that's actually in this field, a business person, because the doctor needs to understand they're adopting a new mantle. They're not just MD, right? They're now MBA. And they've got to want to be able to take on all those roles.
And how would you suggest that they deal with the criticism from their medical community in the local area? The
criticism is going to happen at some level, although, like I said, it's materially less than it was 15 years ago. But they're going to have to just accept it. I mean, get some thick skin and just deal with it and wash it off. But again, I think one of the ways they can best adapt to it is find other practitioners that you meet at A4M when you're at Vegas, that may be in a different town, that you can form a social relationship with and bounce your ideas off of. Because they're in a different market, they're not competing with you directly, but it is about creating that social network for them and support work.
And I guess if all else fails, contact BodyLogicMD.
Always a great option.
Thank you so much, Patrick.
You're welcome, Monica.
Lovely to
Appreciate
meet
it.
you.